The Galactic Empire was ancient, older than most stars in the Terran sky. Its ships blotted out suns, its army spanned 1,000 worlds, and its emperors were spoken of as living gods. When humanity was discovered on the edges of the Orion Spur, the Empire expected another trembling species eager to kneel. That expectation lasted about 5 minutes. The first Terran vessel to cross into Imperial space didn't arrive in a warship or diplomatic cruiser. It was a converted mining freighter, its hull patched with mismatched alloys, its drive core humming with improvised Terran engineering. The Imperials hailed them with the usual demands for subservience. The humans responded with, yeah, sure, just let us dock, we're low on coffee. To the Imperial commanders, it was the height of insolence. No species ever spoke to the Empire like that. The Galactic High Prefect of First Contact demanded an immediate apology. Instead, the human sent him a message file containing a cartoon of a yawning cat. When the Terran delegation finally arrived at the capital world, the Empire expected trembling knees and wide eyes. The marble corridors of the Celestial Spire had been designed to intimidate, gravity fields that bent light, guards in ceremonial armor that shimmered with plasma. But the humans walked through it as though it were a museum tour they'd been dragged to. Against their will, Ambassador Rachel Ortiz glanced up at the towering crystal ceiling, stifled a yawn, and muttered, "Neat. Bit overcompensating, though." Her words echoed through the chamber like blasphemy. The Imperial courtiers froze, uncertain whether to gasp or attack. The Emperor himself appeared soon after, an immense, radiant being whose aura rippled through dimensions. His voice shook the chamber. "Kneel, children of Sol. You stand before eternity." Rachel took a sip of her coffee and shrugged. "Eternity, who? Must be exhausting. You got somewhere we can sit?" The courtiers nearly fainted. To their horror, the Emperor laughed, a booming sound that shattered the silence. "You do not fear me?" he asked, his multiple eyes narrowing. "Or fear," she said. "We've survived 5 extinction events, nuked ourselves twice, and still show up to work on Mondays. You don't scare us, Your Majesty. You just look tired." The Emperor leaned forward, studying the humans as though seeing something long forgotten. His advisors whispered frantically, suggesting annihilation, imprisonment, anything to restore the illusion of control. But the Emperor waved them away. "Let them speak," he commanded. Humanity spoke not with submission, but with humor, audacity, and weary practicality. They didn't bow to the Empire's grandeur, they dissected it. Where others saw divine power, humans saw inefficient bureaucracy, overpriced technology, and architecture built for ego rather than function. By the end of the first meeting, the Emperor's aides were trembling with fury and confusion. The humans hadn't declared war or peace. They'd simply asked, "So, how's your coffee situation here?" "Because ours is terrible." Within months, Terran culture began to seep into the cracks of the Empire. Soldiers swapped ration paste for human snacks. Scholars traded holo scrolls for Terran novels. And wherever a human outpost appeared, laughter and defiance followed. The Empire's oldest species, the HFY, who had not smiled in a millennium, began to chuckle again. The Galactic Senate convened in panic. "They're spreading disorder," hissed one delegate. "They do not conquer, they contaminate." But it was too late. The Empire had never faced a foe who didn't want to fight, didn't want to rule, who simply refused to be impressed. The human presence became a virus of humility in a system addicted to worship. When Imperial officers tried intimidation, humans responded with sarcasm. When they threatened, humans laughed. And when the Empire tried to ban human culture, half the sectors rebelled, not out of loyalty to Earth, but because life had become fun again. The Emperor watched as his once terrifying legions began quoting human memes before battle, painting Terran slang on their armor. The barbarians of Sol had turned an empire of fear into one of reluctant joy. Finally, the Emperor summoned Rachel Ortiz once more. "You have undone centuries of rule," he said. "Our people no longer tremble. Rachel smiled faintly. Maybe that's the point. Fear keeps things in chains. Curiosity? That sets them free. The Emperor gazed upon the human delegation, these strange, fragile beings who had walked into his dominion unbowed. Then he did something unthinkable. He dismissed his guards, sat down beside her, and said, "Teach me this, coffee." And so, the most powerful being in the galaxy learned to yawn, not out of boredom, but out of peace. The Empire didn't fall that day. It simply woke up because sometimes, it isn't power or terror that reshapes civilizations. It's the quiet audacity of a species that looks the cosmos in the eye, takes a sip of caffeine, and says, "Yeah, we've seen worse." The Emperor's private chambers had never hosted outsiders before. Only beings of pure energy or divine heritage were allowed within those shimmering walls. Yet there sat Rachel Ortiz, stirring sugar into a steaming cup while the Emperor of 10,000 Suns awkwardly held his mug, unsure how to drink it without vaporizing it. "Careful," Rachel said with a grin. "Too hot, and you'll burn your tongue." The Emperor looked down at her, baffled. "I possess no tongue. My form is energy woven into matter." Then, she replied cheerfully, "Maybe pretend." For the first time in eons, the Emperor found himself pretending. He mimicked the motion, took a sip, and blinked as the warmth hit his core. "This," he murmured, "this is pleasant." "Yeah," Rachel said, leaning back. "That's caffeine. It's how our species copes with the idea that the universe doesn't care." The Emperor chuckled, a sound like thunder rolling across creation. "You cope with apathy by consuming a stimulant." "Exactly," she said. "Keeps us awake long enough to make it care." Across the Empire, the effects of humanity's arrival deepened. Imperial academies began to study Terran literature, Shakespeare, Vonnegut, Octavia Butler. The Empire's children started drawing their rulers not as gods, but as flawed beings learning to smile. The priests called it heresy. The soldiers called it hope. On the moon of Hescra 9, a human engineer taught Imperial mechanics how to repair their ancient plasma drives using duct tape and stubbornness. When the machines actually ran better, the engineers called it the Terran paradox. In the Senate, debates raged for months. "They are corrosive," screamed the Vertar delegates. "Their insolence spreads like wildfire." But the younger senators, the ones who had grown up listening to Terran music and wearing Terran jackets, replied simply, "Maybe the fire was needed." Meanwhile, humanity continued to act as if nothing extraordinary was happening. They opened diners on Imperial worlds, sold questionable Earth snacks, and held karaoke nights that caused existential crises among the Empire's finest. The Emperor's court began to fracture. Some wanted to crush humanity before their irreverence destroyed the old order. Others argued that the humans had revealed something sacred, that life was meant to be lived, not worshipped. One night, the Emperor summoned his oldest general, XY10, a creature of pure steel and discipline. "Tell me," he said, "what do you see in these humans?" XY10 paused, his voice low. "I see a species that does not measure itself by fear. They do not cower before power because they never believed they had any. Yet somehow they change everything they touch." The Emperor nodded slowly. "They remind me of what we once were." As months turned into years, human influence reached the Empire's core. Old worlds once obsessed with order began hosting open markets filled with laughter and chaos. The rigid imperial anthem was replaced in some systems with Terran jazz. The Senate, horrified, banned Terran culture outright. The next day, they found half their members humming "Fly Me to the Moon." Rachel was summoned again, this time not to negotiate, but to explain. "Ambassador Ortiz," said the Imperial Inquisitor, "you have infected our empire with irreverence. What is your end goal?" Rachel smiled, sipping her coffee as the room waited. "End goal? We're human. We don't have an end goal. We just live. And if we're lucky, we make things a little less miserable while doing it. Her answer spread faster than any propaganda. The Empire had ruled for millennia on purpose and destiny. Humanity brought something infinitely more dangerous, meaninglessness wrapped in courage. Soon, rebellion didn't look like war. It looked like laughter. It looked like a mechanic refusing to kneel. It looked like an emperor sitting cross-legged, drinking coffee, and questioning whether divinity was just good PR. The Imperial Guard, once feared across galaxies, began adopting human battle strategies, chaotic, improvisational, unpredictable. Fight like a Terran became the new phrase whispered among soldiers. Victories followed. So did confusion. The Emperor watched as his empire evolved without his command. He should have been furious. Instead, he found himself proud. The fear that had sustained his rule for eons was gone. In its place was curiosity, a hunger for life he hadn't felt since his youth. When Rachel next visited, the Emperor met her at the landing bay. No throne, no procession. Just him, in a simple robe, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "I understand now," he said quietly. "You do not conquer? You infect." Rachel laughed. "Now. We just share." It was then the Emperor proposed the unthinkable, a partnership. Not annexation, not dominance, but equality. The Galactic Empire and the Terran Federation would coexist as dual custodians of the stars. When news broke, the galaxy trembled. Billions gathered before holoscreens to witness the signing. The Emperor stood beside a human woman barely reaching his chest and declared, for the first time, "We are not gods and subjects. We are simply people." Applause thundered across the cosmos. Planets erupted in celebration. For the first time in recorded history, the Galactic Empire smiled, but not everyone rejoiced. In the shadowed corners of the galaxy, the old aristocracies seethed. "They've turned the throne into a cafe," hissed the nobles. "The humans must be removed." Assassination attempts followed, all failed spectacularly. One assassin was caught when he tried to poison the Emperor's coffee, only for the Emperor to drink it anyway and grin. "Stronger than usual. I like it." When the plotters were captured, Rachel personally addressed them. "You can't kill an idea," she said softly. "Especially not one that laughs in your face." The Empire changed irreversibly. Statues of past rulers were replaced with open plazas. The throne room became a forum where anyone, human or alien, could speak. Fear no longer ruled. Curiosity did. Years later, an alien historian recorded the transformation. He wrote, "The humans arrived without weapons or worship. They brought only questions, humor, and caffeine." And from that, an empire rediscovered its soul. The Emperor lived long enough to see his empire reborn. On his final day, he sat with Rachel in the Garden of Stars, no guards, no ceremony. "I used to believe power was eternal," he said. Rachel smiled gently. "Power fades. Wonder doesn't." When the Emperor passed, his last decree was simple: let the Empire dream. His people obeyed. The Terrans didn't replace the Empire, they revitalized it. They gave eternity a reason to keep going, and in the quiet void between galaxies, when alien travelers now see humans strolling through stations once ruled by gods, they whisper the same phrase they expected: fear. But the humans just yawned.